Welcome to Green and Red, Scrappy Politics for Scrappy People, a regular podcast on radical environmental and anti-capitalist politics, brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Welcome to the silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Parkin, in Berkeley, California. And as always, I am joined by
Bob Bazanko in Houston, Texas.
And folks, today we are going to be talking about two of our favorite topics, which is how bad oil companies are, and then also what we can do to support people in Gaza and Palestine. As we've done many episodes over the last year and a half on Gaza and Palestine, predating that. But today we're going to be talking with Dov Baum, who is the Director of Corporate Accountability and Research at the American Friends Service Committee. There's a campaign that's been going on, at least since the spring that I'm aware of. That's a Boycott Chevron campaign. Chevron, being one of the world's oil majors, operates in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the region in Southern Lebanon and Palestine, Israel. And this campaign is launched, and we're going to talk about it as there's some events also coming up. We'll talk about that too. There's a weekend of action coming up, I believe. But Dov, welcome to the Green and Red podcast.
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you all.
And so, and we've talked about this some on previous episodes, but we know that Chevron runs natural gas extraction and pipelines off the shore of Palestine. It's a major partner with the Israeli energy apartheid regime. Could you maybe we could start off with talking about what are Chevron's interests and operations in the region, just to give a clearer answer than what I just said.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Chevron got into the Israeli market quite recently, 2020 or so, when they bought another company that had gas interests off the shore of Israel, Palestine, which is one of the reasons why we think it would be easy for them to step back from it. It's not that long of a time. Through that purchasing of that company, they became the operator and part owner of two fossil gas fields off the shore of what is called Israel or 48 Palestine, just west of the city of Haifa. One of these gas fields is actually the largest in the Eastern Mediterranean. It is called Leviathan. And the other one is a little smaller, but still quite significant, and it is called Tamar. So Chevron is part owner and operator. As an operator of these gas fields, it is responsible for all the corporate decisions and the daily operations of these fields. It is also the operator and part owner of pipeline that connects a city in the south of the country, Ashkelon, with Al Arish in Egypt, and is used to export gas south into Egypt. Now, this is significant because that pipeline, of course, is not in the territorial waters of Israel. If you go south from Ashkelon in the sea towards Egypt, of course, you cross just in front of the shores of Gaza. We don't have a clear idea exactly where this pipeline is because it's, I think, not for security reasons, they don't really publish those maps. But we know that it has been under very significant security control to protect it from whatever attacks that might happen. The same is true with one of the processing rigs platforms for one of these two fields, which is just off the shores of Gaza. So it's in what is called Israel, but it is really just on the border with Gaza. And to protect that rig, Israel is continuously over the last few years held a very serious presence of naval ships and electronic monitoring to protect that rig, which meant severe restrictions on the fishermen in Gaza and boat people. Anybody who wanted to use the seas of Gaza was restricted from doing so. I think that people would find it really hard to imagine the geography because I live now in California and California is humongous. It's really hard to imagine a place that is so small. You have the gas fields, which are in the north of Israel. The processing rig is really in the south because it's a small country. And entire Gaza is impacted by that because it's so. Last but not least, the deep partnership between Chevron operated gas fields and the Israeli economy is because Israel has moved to using mostly fossil gas in the production of electricity. So that gas that is pumped from these gas fields is what fuels the Israeli energy system as a whole. And the Israeli energy system as a whole is a system of apartheid. And this is what I think we haven't been talking enough about over the last few years, and certainly over the last year with the genocide in Gaza. It didn't seem like the right time to prioritize things like talking about inequality and apartheid of this kind. But the whole electrical grid in Israel is built in such a way to favor some populations over others. And that is including Gaza, including the West Bank, including Palestinians and Jews inside what is called 48 Palestine or the State of Israel. We see communities, Palestinian communities that for decades were not connected to the Israeli electrical grid because Israel wants to get rid of them. We see Palestinian communities in the Jordan Valley that try to compensate by building solar systems to supply them with energy so they can, refrigerate their milk. I'm talking about the shepherd communities. And continuously, again and again, these solar farms are being destroyed by settlers, sometimes by the military, again and again and again. We see communities that are urban communities, Palestinian cities and towns connected to the grid that are, they suffer from subpar services from the Israeli electrical company. They have to connect illegally because there is no way to expand the grid. They have very frequent drops in service, for example, and no maintenance. Their fees for electricity are being taken by Israel without their permission. So higher fees. It's crazy. I don't know if people know about that, but Israel collects taxes on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. So, for example, goods that are imported into the country, they have to go through Israeli ports of entry, and Israel collects the taxes on these goods. And these taxes are supposedly for the Palestinian Authority. It's part of the Paris agreements, which were part of the Oslo Accords. The tax envelope. Israel controls all the external taxing. And so Israel bought these sums of money as hostage. And they release the monies when they want to and to whatever needs that they think are appropriate. Sometimes they withhold the monies so the Palestinian Authority cannot pay salaries to its workers. And if the Israeli electrical company claims that the Palestinian Authority owes it money, they will get it from the Israeli government, taken from the Palestinian tax money. So this is all these are different forms of energy apartheid. And as the main supplier of fossil gas to the Israeli economy, Chevron is complicit.
Are there other fossil fuel actors, corporate fossil fuel actors, which are also at play here, or is it mostly Chevron?
Yeah, so it's mostly Chevron and there are others. Our team in the American Friends Service Committee, we put together a collection of tools, calls for action, information pages, toolkits that you can find on a website, boycottchevron.info. And we are just finishing an update to our main research on that website, which should be put up there by Friday. So I'm looking into the new version that I already have access to because I've been working on it. And it also lists all the other actors. So Chevron operated gas fields provide about 2/3 of Israeli consumption. And all of the gas exports from Israel to Jordan and to Egypt, which is quite significant. It's very important to the Jordanians and to the Egyptians. But there is a third gas field that is producing gas for the Israeli needs, which is run by a Greek-British firm, Energean Oil and Gas. And then there are other partners that are part owners or either going and doing exploration projects or are part owners of existing gas fields that include Azerbaijani company, the state oil company of Azerbaijan, and also an Abu Dhabi firm. And potentially in exploration projects, there were also new projects that were started with some participation by BP and Dana Petroleum, both of them British companies. But it is mostly Chevron.
What you're describing is, I think, a regional approach to oil control, to energy control there. And I never really thought of Palestine as a piece of this, but is this kind of part of a larger kind of program to gain control over more assets in that region? The attack on Iran, the U.S. relationships with Saudi. Is this kind of part of a bigger project for kind of oil hegemony?
That's a great question. And I know very little about it. So for many years, for almost 20 years now, I have been researching companies involved in Israeli apartheid, Israeli occupation, Israeli genocide, and actually not looking into these whole questions of energy and oil and gas. And I think I'm on a very steep learning curve right now with Chevron because I've never thought of these connections. So, for example, give you an example. I was thinking as we were doing the update of this research for the website, I was thinking, what are the impacts of the war on Chevron operations? It might be interesting to look at it. And we found that there were very significant impacts. In fact, Chevron had to shut down operations more than once, continuously, again and again. And on paper, it seems like because they shut off production, they lost money. But actually, in the end, they made money, which is interesting. It's like magic. Those corporations, they are magicians. They make profit from the oddest things. And I thought, what about the fact that they had to stop some of the supply of gas to Egypt? Now, this gas is not liquefied. This gas is used directly into the electrical grid, so they need it. If you shut off the gas supply, you impact the production of energy. You'll get blackouts. It's as direct as that. And it's not stored anywhere. And yes, Egypt had some real problems with energy over the last year, and partially also because of these disruptions in supply from the Chevron operated fields. And there were some rumors about Egypt looking for other suppliers for gas because their energy needs are greater than what they can supply themselves. They have some gas fields of themselves. And I was like, yay, this is good news for the campaign. Because that would mean, in my limited mind, I thought that would mean that Chevron future profits are at risk. This is a risk for Chevron. It's a risk for Chevron investors. And then I read more about it, and they're looking at getting the gas from Aphrodite, which is a gas field very close to the other two that we just described, but owned by Cyprus and operated by, I don't know, that company, some big company from the United States, something with a Chevron. It's always Chevron.
Just a little north of where Scott is too. So.
Oh, yeah. It's just always Chevron. And then there are some Israeli analysts who raised an alarm a few months ago saying, we do have that third field, which is operated by that Greek company in Ajad, but it's a smaller field and it will get depleted quite soon. And then we get to choose between Chevron and Chevron. So it's a monopoly, not just on a state level, it's a monopoly for the entire region. And then, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wanted to also add that I looked at gas because obviously these are these gas fields. There's a lot of conversation about them. And I didn't look at oil. But if you look at oil, you get the same picture. Israel imports oil. It doesn't have any of its own. And it imports oil from a big chunk of it from companies in Kazakhstan that are partially owned by Chevron. And it traveled through a pipeline through Russia that is also partially owned and fully operated by Chevron. And then wherever you look, you get the same picture. Some of the same players also keep popping up.
That's why I thought of that, because Israel is not a big country. It's being destroyed by war. By itself, it doesn't have an immense amount of economic value, but regionally, it seems that fits into something much bigger. And especially since the way you just described Chevron's role in exporting oil from Kazakhstan and elsewhere and having investments abroad, it really does, I think, paint a much bigger and, frankly, more ominous picture of what they're up to.
The whole gas thing in the East Mediterranean is significant geopolitically, mainly because of the war in the Ukraine. That's what made it so significant. The need that Europe has in more gas and the stories that abound, and also some preliminary agreements that were signed to export this Israeli gas, maybe through Egypt to Europe. So through Egypt to Cyprus to Europe, maybe build a pipeline, maybe liquefy it. They had all these ideas. So hopefully, the last year, with all of its tragedies and its direct impacts on the ability of these companies to actually do any maintenance, do any kind of expansion project. They were planning a lot of expansions that got stuck. Other companies that were chosen to do exploration in the sea decided not to. Yeah, I think war is also bad for business.
Yeah.
It's good for some business and it's also bad for business. And luckily, that might mean that this will not happen, I hope, because this crazy extract everything they can as fast as they can before it's too late. It's too late either because it's depleted, either because there are some new regulations, because somebody notices that the planet is burning. They're trying to extract everything they can. So anything that slows them down is good news.
The campaign is called Boycott Chevron. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that. What are some of the goals and the demands? I have some other questions about just energy boycotts in general, but just to start with this campaign.
Yeah.
And we have stickers.
Thank you for having the stickers. These are great stickers. We have some more if people want them. You can order them on the website, boycottchevron.info.
Yeah.
This was my commercial break. Yeah. So the campaign, I think, is over a year old. I think maybe 2 years now. We started quite slow. We were looking for what to do with Chevron. Obviously, it's a good boycott target because people shouldn't buy any of that anyhow. And obviously a divestment target because there's already a divestment campaign from fossil fuel companies. But what else? What can we do in order to use this target to educate people, especially people who are in the areas where Chevron is active? It's not everywhere across the U.S., but it's definitely in the West Coast, Texas. How do we use that to educate people about what's happening in Palestine? It's really as simple as that. We also thought it would make a good target because potentially it might work. We want Chevron to step away from its business operations in Palestine. We really want Chevron to divest itself. The reason why is because this is like a very powerful, big company with a lot of experience that is extracting as much as they can. If they are to be replaced by a smaller company or a company with less exposure globally, that would definitely stop some aspects of this expansion project. And that is a good thing. It will also make the case that there is a price to pay for such business activities. Maybe help promote a new standard for corporate behavior in the area. So we want to win this. We want to get Chevron out of there, even if it is a partial win. So these are the goals of the campaign. As for the campaign itself, what I find most exciting about it is that it truly brings together people across issue areas and geographical areas. We have a global coalition that is led by the BDS movement from Palestine. And we have parts of this coalition. We have indigenous groups from Ecuador and the Philippines. We have small community groups in parts of the U.S. We have an activist group inside Israel of Israeli Jews that blocks the entrance to Chevron offices in Israel. And we have, of course, the fantastic organizing right here. I'm in the Bay Area, near the Chevron refinery in Richmond. Links into many years of activism here in Richmond against Chevron and connecting to local residents who have suffered a lot from this company. And so it is a way for us to I don't know, to build something that goes beyond just Palestine or just environmental justice.
About 15 years ago, there was a coalition called the True Cost of Chevron,
Mhm.
which included representatives from over 60 countries where there was active organizing and campaigning going on against Chevron and every South Africa, the Philippines, obviously Ecuador. We've done shows on Ecuador, but obviously what Chevron and Texaco did and Ecuador was like horrendous. But it's actually pretty amazing when you go after such a big mega corporation like this, how many like different pieces there are of what they've done to violate human rights, to destroy the climate, what have you. So it sounds like this is also starting to come together with this campaign similar to the way it did 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's the easiest way to unite. We always say we need to work together. You are what, green and red? Like, how do we bring all these colors together? And one way to do that is to look at the other side. They don't have a problem deporting people, exploiting workers, and discriminating against people of color. They can do all of it. They can do it all in one sentence. We can use that. But to be a little bit more serious, this is the moment. We all know that we need to build a more robust movement for the challenges ahead. And the challenge is not ahead, the challenges that are right here. And for many years, I've been involved in the Palestine justice movement for some time. And for many years, it was really hard for Palestine activists to work with others. We wanted to reach out to the divestment movement, divestment from fossil fuel or from divesting for environmental justice, and to add in things like militarization and war and occupation. And they said, we agree with you, we love you, we cannot work with you, not out in the open, because it will harm us, because you are more of a lightning rod. And it's no longer the case. It's no longer the case. Over the last year and 4 months, with the genocide in the progressive islands where we live, some of us, Palestine has become I don't know, a much more household issue, much more mainstream. People understand and know more a lot. People want to do more. People feel the injustice. They understand it's much, much clearer. And we have been organized over the last year. We, the Free Palestine movement, we've been out in the streets. We've been doing direct action. We've been building. We have a lot more organizations. We have a lot more capacity. And so we are ready to be part of that space on which we can build a more shared movement. I'll give you an example. In our divestment work, I do a lot of work for divestment, student divestment, city divestment, county divestment, state divestment. Any public pool of money should have an ethical investment policy and invest in the well-being of us and our communities and our planet, and not in the destruction of those. That's it. That's the policy. Yes. It sounds very simple. But when it comes to specific cities, specific politicians, specific institutions or community foundations and so on, each have their own pet projects, the things that they care about more, the things that their constituents care about more, the things that matter more where they are, all sorts of reasons. When we come to these, whoever, cities, counties, and so on, and we say, we want you to have an ethical investment policy and make sure you don't invest in any of these things, they want it to be more specific. And many times it comes down to, okay, war and occupation and environmental justice. So without even meaning to, we are promoting divestment from the big oil companies as part of course, you have to do that. Yeah.
What kind? Oh, good.
You go first.
What kind of actions have you done so far with regard to Chevron? Gone to their meetings or gone to board meetings, or what's actually part of the campaign?
Yeah. And I don't think I've been to their board meeting. I have to say that because I work for AFSC and we haven't been invested in any of these companies for good reason, we haven't done any investor engagement efforts of our own. I know that others have. The campaign is quite new. So we had a week of action in September. That was a global week of action that had a lot of symbolic actions outside events that are sponsored by Chevron or Chevron gas stations, or as I said, the Chevron refinery in Richmond and the Chevron offices in north of Tel Aviv in Israel. We have another weekend of action that is coming up this coming Friday. And it is supposed to be just around their earnings call for the quarter, which is scheduled for this Friday. And we're hoping it will be even bigger, that will have a lot more participants in all parts of the country. And this time we want to target gas stations. The idea is that gas stations are, wherever Chevron is active, gas stations are very common. They are very easy, very accessible. And we're thinking differently about Chevron-owned gas stations versus Chevron-owned gas stations are just a corporate location. So they can be a good place for educating people. I don't know, having a vigil, leafleting, whatever people want to do to educate the public. While the franchisees in our minds are potential partners. We actually want to tell them we boycott Chevron, so we will not buy here. But you actually don't want this big noise and publicity around your station. So think, can you join us? Would you like to join us? And there are many ways in which a gas station owner can join us. If they want to, they can show sympathy. They can say, yeah, I care about what Chevron does. They can actually send a letter to Chevron saying, I'm concerned about these things. They can maybe at some point even go public with it and be counted as a public letter to Chevron from gas station owners. They can put a sign in the window that supports the campaign. Not saying boycott Chevron because they're supposed to sell Chevron gas, but saying get Chevron out of energy apartheid. And so we took the lead from a similar campaign that happened back in the 70s and 80s around shale oil and their involvement with supplying fuel to the apartheid regime in South Africa. Shale oil was one of the biggest campaigns in the anti-apartheid campaign at the time. And a lot of it was around gas stations. And a lot of gas stations actually joined the campaign eventually. It took some time, but they did.
One thing I'm curious about, and you've talked about this some, but it's interesting to see this sort of overlap that's been going on between the Free Palestine movement and the climate movement, which is the first time I would say I've been an organizer in the climate movement for a long time. I did anti-war. I've done anti-genocide work for even longer than I was in the climate movement. And it's very interesting to see the sort of dynamics. There's a lot of, especially younger people who have been involved in climate the last few years and inspired to be in the streets around climate. And then as this sort of genocide unfolded on Gaza, I see so many of them in the streets and doing direct actions. We organized a blockade. Me and a crew of climate organizers helped organize a blockade down at Lockheed Martin in the South Bay back last year. But there's also an element of people within the climate movement who I would say are Zionist or Zionist adjacent or confused about the whole thing. And I'm curious about how you see this sort of interaction going on between people from the climate movement who are very solidly Free Palestine and then also people in the Free Palestine Solidarity movement.
Yeah, I don't know. So here is an intersection that I came up to through my work on corporations and divestment, not so much with work outside in the streets. That was not my forte. Really, my experience was that the door was closed up until recently, and now it's open. And especially with young people, because they see the connections. The connections are not as simplistic as they sometimes make them to be. That is frustrating for me because I'm a researcher and I'm supposed to give them the information and they're supposed to read it. But really, the connections are deep. They are deep connections. The extraction economy, the exploitation of war for profit, the exploitation of captive markets for profit, the way that people's lives and futures are not counted, and the big corporations, which are always the same. But the direct connections, like saying, oh, war is destroying the environment, how people really want to make that connection, or that I think these are a bit simplistic. And there is, for example, there is a climate justice movement in Israel of Jewish Israelis that are very much Zionist and aligned with the state. And they still would participate in direct action against fossil fuel companies. Of course, these contradictions are there. It's not so evident, the connections.
Just in the last few months, we've seen reports that McDonald's and Starbucks apparently have lost a lot of business and money because of their support for Israel. Do you envision that kind of strategy being applicable to something like Chevron? We can create people, not necessarily owners of the gas stations, but people to boycott Chevron, try to find somebody else.
Yeah, that was amazing for me. I've been involved with many corporate campaigns around Palestine over the years, and this was wow. McDonald's and Starbucks both were what we call organic targets. They grew out of the movement. They were not planned and curated by NGOs like Chevron is. And if you would ask me earlier, I would say these are not good targets. They're not good targets because they don't really support Israel very much. Starbucks actually has no presence in Israel whatsoever. They came, they opened some cafes and coffee shops, and they left. So it's ridiculous. And McDonald's too. But in both cases, the company has participated in some parts of the company participated in some clear show of support for Israel during the genocide. And that was enough to ignite the public anger. And also these are good targets because these are horrendous companies and they're not very healthy to begin with. I just saw a report in the Israeli media saying that McDonald's lost over $7 billion in revenues. $7 billion. Now that is significant. That would make any company rethink something. Yeah. And that is because the BDS movement is truly global. It is truly global with a very strong base in the global South. And the US is not necessarily the best place to organize all these things. We can get some support. Maybe we can get some impact. We can definitely do more work with investors and institutions here that have a lot more money and influence. But if you are looking for numbers, doing activism in Latin America, in the Arab world, that's where the numbers are. And I think the companies know that. If they have an exposure in the global South, they stand to lose something from aligning themselves with such a controversy, such as Palestine.
Is there anti-Chevron work going on a large scale in other countries?
Yeah, I don't know. We are hoping. This campaign we're starting to build.
Yes.
You look, we put out a map of Chevron operations that is focused on the U.S. on the website, but with some information of where in other countries people can buy Chevron fuel. It's usually most countries like Canada and so on, they have a franchisee network that is owned by one company, all the gas stations. That means that's a little bit of a different target. Still something that you can boycott and work around. Potentially, this can become a global campaign. I have to say that most of our work so far has been in the US and it's very much US focused. And it's hard to work without our friends in the Northeast because Chevron has no presence there. So we're not used to that, working without our friends there.
It's interesting. My day job is about corporate campaigning for almost 20 years now. And it's in my organization where I work, we try to steer away from boycotts because it's challenging to prove the impact. And if we're not as successful as we want to be, then it's hard to justify that to our members, et cetera. And it's especially interesting to hear that when we're talking about, to me, that Starbucks and McDonald's thing that's just a meme that went around. And it just seems like it went viral. Like we shared it on our Instagram for the podcast. And it's just actually interesting how actually there is a certain level of which like where boycotts work and the corporate decision makers are afraid of that. And you talking about BP and Shell and other around apartheid, around South African apartheid is I would think that you would be getting the attention of these oil companies, particularly if they're seeing the results of that organic boycott. And I'm wondering, are you at a level with your campaign where you're in communication with Chevron?
Yeah, not yet. I'm hoping for that. I hope somebody will be willing to do that work. All good campaigns need that. But specifically about boycotts, you bring a very good point about boycotts. So I'm part of the BDS movement, BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So the first word is boycott, which means that many people, millions and millions of people all around the world, they just want to boycott something. And that is not just an automatic thing. That was a call for Palestinian civil society about 20 years ago. It came out and said, we ask you to use tools such as boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And so there is a real reason. This is the widest coalition in Palestinian civil society. So the people who are most impacted are asking us to boycott. And for good reason, because Israel is enjoying all that support and impunity from the West. So we have to start removing those supports. So boycotts make sense. Still, what it means is that I'm part of a movement that always looks to boycott stuff. And many times our team has to push against that. People are publishing just immense lists of boycott targets that are never ending. We even saw our own opposition, official Israeli apologists that are paid for by the state of Israel, publishing such lists as well, just to make the case that you cannot boycott Israel because it's everywhere around you. And some of these boycotts are self-punishing. People say, I will not go to this thing. I will not do this thing. I cannot do that. Because there's so much to boycott. And really, my mantra about it is always boycott is a tool.
Right.
Just like a strike, you don't rush into it. You use it, squeeze it as much as you can before you actually go there. Once you use it, you lose its impact. And also, we want the Boycott National Committee itself that leads the BDS movement has told us we want to focus efforts. We want to pick a small number of targets and put all of our efforts on them for us to win those campaigns and create this new standard that we are hoping for. So Chevron is one of those priority campaigns, and it was picked very carefully. And I think it was picked because we think Chevron would fold. We do think it is possible. There's no other reason to do that otherwise.
Right. One last thing on boycotts and BDS is that obviously it is effective because to me, sometimes a measure of how effective is something is how much the state responds in trying to outlaw it. And we've actually seen a lot of outlawing of BDS, I think naming it in some places terrorism by the U.S. government. And therefore, to me, that's actually often a sign is that they're very worried about it. So as a strategy.
Yeah, we have, 30 some US states with legislation against BDS, mostly symbolic, not really very impactful on our work, but scary for people.
Right.
And there are many countries in Europe with similar legislation. That was a legislative campaign led by Alec and some of the regular typical actors in the field. We have executive order from today from President Trump about some measures to impose against the students that called for divestment. This is the divestment campaign. So
Right.
there is a lot of efforts in different states to make divestment itself impossible, or ethical investment policy to make that impossible. That's part of their campaign against the woke economy. So there are some states in which it is already unlawful for a public institution to adopt an ethical investment policy. For example, in Florida. So there are many efforts to make some of what we do and some of what others around us to make it harder. I wouldn't use that as the sole indication of our success because that's depressing. I would say the success is that whenever people change their consumption habits or when people join a campaign asking their city to divest, they make something that is about Palestine, some country out there in the Middle East, and make it their own business and they make it local. And when they do, they care about it more deeply. They learn about it. They get to know the people involved. It's more personal. They understand it is about their money. And maybe we're building the muscle for divesting ourselves from these crimes. And then our cities, our counties, our states, one day, maybe even the federal government. I'm trying to be optimistic.
That's all we got at this point.
Exactly.
Do you have any other questions, Bob?
No, this was really great. Thanks so much. And good luck in your work. And also just a shout out to the AFSC. Growing up, American Friends Service Committee was really a vital part of anything that was going on. Civil rights, Vietnam War, whatever. So it's really an outstanding organization. I'm glad to see it's still going at it.
Yeah, and I'd like to love to have you back sometime to talk about more divestment campaign and boycott campaigns, because I think it's a fascinating history which needs to be talked about more. And I think we're in a moment where people need to learn more about past organizing and past campaigns.
Yeah, I'd love to. And also present campaigns,
Yeah.
Yeah, that too. Just as a last promo, as we wrap up, do you want to just tell us about the week of action, the day of action, just one more time?
Definitely. This weekend of action is this weekend, starting on January 31st. And we call all groups and organizers and organizations to join us wherever they are. You can find more information on boycottchevron.info, including the fact sheet about what Chevron does and toolkits for the weekend of action, and a place where you can sign up for the weekend of action so we can help promote your vigil, your action, whatever you are planning. And there will be more. It's just one weekend of action, but there will be more. There is also, thank you for that. There is also a pledge that individuals can sign on that website that goes as a letter to the CEO of Chevron, pledging not to buy Chevron products, including their gas and fuel, of course.
Right. And if you want a sticker, No Fuel for Genocide, which is for the people on audio, that's what Bob was just holding up. You can also check out the website, boycotchevron.info.
Yeah, these are cute stickers. And
Yeah.
they fit very well on some gas pumps, just over the pump. But then don't do that. It's vandalism. Just don't.
Yeah. We're not encouraging law breaking it at all.
No.
Folks, we've been talking with Dov Baum, who works with the American Friends Service Committee, talking about the Boycott Chevron campaign and the weekend of action starting on Friday. We'll put the information about everything in our show notes as well. But if you like what you hear, and please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to this on the audio platforms, give us a rate and review. And if you really like us, go to greenandredpodcast.org and hit the support button, or become a patron at patreon.com/greenredpodcast. It's been great talking with you. Very great interview. I'm happy to have had you on the show. We're happy to have you on the show. I'll hopefully see you out at a Chevron station on Friday or Saturday or wherever it's happening in the Bay Area. So Sunday.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And everybody else out there, make trouble and misbehave, and we'll talk to you again soon.